What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 315. My name is Steve. I'm here as one of the co-hosts. I'm here as always with...
I'm Ron.
And I'm John. And wow, 315 episodes.
That's crazy. That is a great accomplishment. A great accomplishment.
We should say that after every episode starts.
Let's keep this one short. I think we got off to a great start. We kept it positive. Maybe now's a good time to wrap it up. Call it a week.
It's a very special episode and the shortest one ever. You're welcome. Right. So we're going to be talking a couple I guess big titles. I mean, we're going to be talking, I think a couple of us saw the first episode for the second season of The Morning Show to talk a little bit about, which comes back out on Apple TV. And last week saw the release of James Wan's new horror film, Malignant, which was in theaters and on HBO Max is one of the day and date releases that Warner Media still has coming out on HBO. So that was available as of Friday. We all checked it out since we last recorded. So we'll be talking about that for the better part of this episode. And there will be a section towards the end where we'll have some spoilers too, because that's probably the best conversation about this movie will probably involve spoilers. But that'll be a little later. I guess at the top of the show, before we get into any of these little like mini reviews that we have, I wanted to just kind of mention to you guys, you know, in light of the success of Shang-Chi at the box office, this window that Disney protected for this, or this experiment, whatever they called it, it was a success, you know, in terms of this pandemic that we're, you know, living in and through and just a part of now. You know, some things have happened over the past week that I think are really interesting and kind of wanted to get your guys' feeling on it. But basically, like a lot of Disney titles mainly that really kind of made the news, but some other studios have even come out to say the similar thing, where like I think that coming out has really kind of given that vote of confidence that these studios needed. We mentioned it last week, you know, to officially announce that, you know, these movies are going to be given protected theatrical windows, you know. And I think Disney, on behalf of what the rest that they have coming out this year, including the Marvel property, the Eternals, and you know, the Ridley Scott's The Last Duel, which is a Fox property. There's a couple other West Side Story, like big movies that are coming out that have basically been confirmed that they're going to have either a 30 or a 45. Most of them have a 45 day window, and I kind of, you know, now that they've made that commitment, and even making comments like, you know, the whole Disney Plus Premier Access thing is kind of sort of sounding like it's done for the foreseeable future until, you know, they reassess. But what do you guys think of this commitment? What do you guys think of it? It feels like it's kind of something has shifted a little bit in the wake of Shang-Chi, which is, you know, kind of been this, you know, shining light of like a way to maybe still make some money. And again, Ronald, I think you said it last week, it doesn't mean they're going to make anything near what Shang-Chi is making, which at the time of recording this podcast, you know, it crossed $150 million in 12 days, which is like a record during the pandemic. And probably by, you know, in the next like 5-6 days, it'll probably cross, or over the next weekend or so, it'll probably cross 200 million, making it the first movie to do so during the pandemic domestically. Yeah. So I don't know. It's like, it's a special thing, but the performance has reassured, I think, a lot of studios and filmmakers and, you know, talent all across the board. So, I mean, what do you think about this commitment, Ronald? I mean, what does it say to you to hear them actually committing to this and, you know, in some ways, like putting the whole streaming piece of it on the back burner?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do, because I watch and listen to a lot of media, is I like to listen to like big critics. One of them is John Campea. Like, you know, he's a pretty big guy in the industry. He has been pretty adamant about theaters just being alive and streaming not being a thing for these bigger titles. And while I think that's a good idea, I think it's a leap of faith. And sometimes that leap can be Frogger. You're literally trying to hop across this traffic of a bunch of movies kind of coming out at once. And I think that there's going to be some collateral damage where sometimes like there's a risk that you're taking, right? So like if it comes out in a theater There's like steam that's supposed to be behind it that'll see to it that it happens. That's, you know, through viral things, through the proper promotion. If that doesn't work, you will have lost all that promotional money and then hope to get a little bit of money back in PVOD. Whereas if you do the PVOD thing, you're taking less of a risk for, and I don't mean this for everything. Like obviously bigger ones should maybe try to come out, but for the kind of middle of the road ones that could be really successful, I feel like burning the money in promotion and then not getting the money that you want to make, and then maybe the idea that somebody's like, oh, that flopped in the movie theater,
right?
That reputation carrying on the PVOD can maybe hurt it. So I think it's weird. I think it's very strange that all of these movies can't work. And I think that is my issue. But I do understand trying, because you could get, maybe if you get half of what Shang-Chi got, that would be a victory. But I don't even think that some of these things are going to get half.
Right.
That's my fault. That's my problem with it. What do you think, John?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple thoughts that are going through my head. One is just, there's a new kind of content, entertainment, storytelling, whatever you want to call it, that we've all gotten used to, which is the serialized television show, which a lot of times is like an expanded, this could be a movie kind of thing. And even down to the specific stuff, like Marvel has had all the shows this year. I just kind of took stock of all the Marvel stuff we've gotten this year.
Right.
And it was what we still have coming this year. And I was like, wow, they went from like nothing last year to like
a boatload,
to like, we're just going to have something new every week, you know? And I don't know. I kind of think that for those types of properties, it does say, well, there is a kind of movie that really works better if you see it on the big screen. It's a 2-hour story. It's got momentum. It's got spectacle, like Shang-Chi, which I think I would have loved at home. I do think was much more impressive on a big screen. I think we said about the Suicide Squad that we wish we could have had a big screen experience with that was like, it worked at home, but we wished we could have had the big screen experience with it. So I think we already know there's some stuff that really needs that presentation to come over, and there's other stuff that maybe doesn't. So I guess to me, I'll say Godspeed little doodle to the streaming model that we got to enjoy for a little while. For a minute, it really seemed like we were going to see this synergy of what they could do just with the release pattern, you know. And what we've discovered is, no, these things, those 2-hour stories, those things with all the spectacle, those things need to be huge blockbusters to be worth the while of the studio to make them and to get everybody excited about them and all the marketing and all that stuff. So I guess if we were thinking, oh, a certain kind of movie might die if theaters are dying, and now we're going to say, no, the theatrical experience will exist for those types of movies and for all movies. I don't mean to be this idiot who thinks it has to have spaceships and explosions in it to see it on the big screen. Right. I'm just saying certain movies like definitely need that big screen to really feel like what they are. And other movies are just like, most movies are going to be more impressive. You know, Problem Child 2 is probably like more impressive on a big screen than on your home system, you know, even, and I don't mean to pick that movie. I'm sure it's fine cinematography wise, whatever. I just think we already know there's certain entertainment that we watch at home and certain entertainment that you got to go to the theaters to see. So it's like the fact that we're kind of back there is no great surprise.
Right.
And what I think we might see that they haven't said they won't do is we will see maybe this creation of that kind of in between, like maybe Disney, Marvel, WB, whoever, they're going to have their version of the sort of Netflix level movie that comes out on streaming. And, you know, there's already some like DC has announced some properties that are being made into movies for HBO Max that you can expect to be like a reduced budget. Like I think Blue Beetle is a superhero that's getting a movie, but it's going to be an HBO Max movie. So it's like, I don't know. I think they're going to find a way to keep you busy at home and yet still have some movies that, you know, we're still talking only a month and a half. That in this weird time, a month and a half either feels like 20 years or it feels like 5 minutes. So you'll be able to watch these things at home if you insist on being part of that moment, you know, or if you thrive on being part of that moment when everyone's seeing something and it's new. That is the thing that's really going to mutate, right? Because now already with Shang-Chi, there's a lot of people like you guys who are going to see it but haven't seen it yet. And it's like,
Right.
well, the rest of us are doing a pretty good job of keeping our mouths shut about the surprises. You know, we don't want to ruin things for you, but it's different to have this staggered conversation where,
Yeah.
oh, who's
Oh, for
seen it
sure.
yet? Whereas normally used to be like a big movie comes out and like within a weekend, you kind of know you can start making references to it and that most people will have at least some frame of or an idea of what you're talking about. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it doesn't surprise me. They're going to figure out how to make more money. What the bigger mystery for me is outside of that is like, how long will that last? I mean, it seems like maybe we're just going to start opening things back up and there's not going to be another lockdown or whatever you want to call it. But I think we're all still being extremely cagey. So it's not like they're going to start making the money they used to make.
Sure, definitely.
So,
And I mean, I do think like kind of what you're alluding to is a point I was going to make too, is that like, I think in some ways it, you know, viewers have been trained a little bit that, you know, the ability to watch stuff at home that's new stuff is a very valuable experience, especially
Yeah.
if it's the part of something that you're already paying for. So I mean, I think those that are maybe being a little more cautious still, and or those that may be back to their normal life, but they don't really want to commit to going to a movie theater anymore.
right.
All to just say, I think that like what we're seeing in some ways are like remnants of movies that were already in production, you know, before COVID hit. And there's still, you know, probably a year's worth or 8 months of movies that are going to be coming out in 2022, if not further, that are movies that, you know, were supposed to come out, you know, already. And they're just trying to get them out still. So like those movies, like Rana was saying, some of these massive budget movies that are still going to come out in theaters, those movies may not ever be made for theaters again. Like they may not be made with the intent to ever see a theater. But at this point, the commitment is still that because that's what the intention was. And they're seeing of maybe the light that, you know, like maybe we can actually make a lot of money back before we, you know, put it on VOD or put it on the streaming. So like what John was saying is I think where it really is going to go is that like once those movies are out and the programming going forward from here is that they know which movies people are going to pay to see in a theater.
Right.
And those are the ones that are going to probably be made for the theater. And there's going to be a whole nother experience where maybe these movies are, you know, greenlit and budgeted for whatever studios have the over the top service of the, you know, in-house. And I think that'll be really interesting because like some of those genres that we love, like some of those movies, there may be more of those kinds of movies, like more comedies. And even though horror movies make a lot of money in theaters sometimes, and they're usually bankable because of the budgets, I mean, there's no reason. I mean, there's another Paranormal Activity movie coming out, you know, in a month on Paramount Plus that we know nothing about basically besides who's making it. You know,
Wow.
there's no, today they just released the name of the movie, which is I think Paranormal Activity Next of Kin. But I mean, this is an example of it though, is that they're making this movie directly for the streaming platform. It was never intended to go to a theater. And this was announced during the pandemic, like right at the start of it last year. And, you know, I think that's an example of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And you know, it'll be interesting to see how that goes because like, you know, certain kinds of movies that weren't getting made in the theater because it could never make back, you know, a $20 million budget, even though it was kind of specialized, they may see value in putting it into their original programming on, you know, Peacock or on Disney Plus or whatever the case may be. But it'll be really interesting. And you know, these big movies that are coming out in the back half of this year, I'll be interested to see how well they do. Next of which being like Venom and Bond, I guess, are the next two big ones. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I just wanted to kind of get your take on that, so we can move on. Do you guys want to talk? Did you both see the morning show, or
Yeah.
did John?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you guys talk about the season premiere of the second season for Apple TV Plus's The Morning Show?
The Morning Show, Apple TV Plus's drama that stars Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston, who work on the morning show that has just experienced a catastrophic sort of experience. One of the personalities prior to Reese Witherspoon coming on had been accused of many things and had to leave the show. And this follows the events about 6 to 9 months after.
I gotta say, I'm gonna have to get back to you on the timeline, because this is one of those second seasons that, and I think the overarching topic that I had, and you can even chime in on this, Steve, even without having seen it, is this is one of those second seasons that it feels like maybe they changed their mind about what they wanted to do with the second season after the end of the first season. Like I
yeah,
think
I know you said.
I mean, there are shows where they, like Breaking Bad comes to mind, where they were famous for like painting themselves into a narrative corner at the end of a season that they had no idea how to get out of, but they would spend the next season, usually the first chunk of the next season, getting out of whatever narrative corner they had painted themselves into.
Right.
And that not every show needs to be that linear, but this show feels like there were certain things that were cooking at the end of the first season that they kind of double back on. Like I think they want a certain thing going on with this show. I think they want it to be Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon kind of partnered. And I think that, like, you know how sometimes the season ends in a moment and you feel like, okay, is this new shattered existence? All these characters are kind of spread out. Is this like the new status quo for this show? Or are they going to spend part of the next season getting things back where they were, or getting people back around each other? And it kind of feels like maybe they're doing a little bit of that, of like, this season is like Jennifer Aniston's character left the show. Well, now she's coming back to the show. Billy Crudup's character, Corey, who is probably my favorite thing about the show. He's sort of like disgraced and fired, but he's back with the company. You know what I mean? It's almost like they didn't want to change as much as they thought they did at the end of the first season. But outside of that, I think this is just one of those well-written, well-acted, well-shot dramas that, like, you get swept up in the crackling kind of Aaron Sorkin-y. It's not Aaron Sorkin, but it's got a little bit, it's a lot of walk and talk and a lot of people doing like jargon that it's the back behind the scenes workings of this morning show. And you go, I don't know if this is realistic or not. You know, I don't know. This feels like 50-50 maybe, because the stuff they put on the screen that's a representation of the morning show, which is a la, you know, Good Morning America or the Today Show, it's about half accurate. It's like sometimes they nail the tone of the way those shows feel, and sometimes what they're putting up there doesn't really feel like that. So I have to assume the behind the scenes stuff might be the same way, that like maybe this is halfway the way it works at a big network, and then halfway it's soap opera. But, you know, I mean, the people were, if you look across the board at the people working on this show, I think this was the show that we said about when Apple TV Plus started, that they were clearly trying to hit that HBO of streaming spot of like, these shows are shows that we're passionate about and we're putting a lot of effort into, and they've been tooled, you know, and they've got all these stars. And we haven't even mentioned Steve Carell yet. He was kind of one of the, he was the disgraced harasser, abuser of the first season, and I haven't seen him pop up yet in the second season, but I think he's going to be part of it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they definitely warped the show. The way the first episode ends of the new season is a great nod to a very depressing year that we all just remember, when like it actually ends with it's New Year's Eve and Billy Crudup says things are looking up, and then someone sneezes behind him and they pan up and you see the big 2020 in lights, and it's like okay, yeah, and you go, oh, okay, so this show, that's what they're doing. We lost Steve.
Yeah,
maybe he'll hop back on. Anyway, we'll just finish talking about the show, and he might jump back in while we're doing this. But you know, how do you feel about story-wise? What's your engagement level with this show? Do you feel like you're going to just absorb all the episodes pretty quickly, or
it's one of my favorite shows. I've absorbed quite a bit of it. It really, the first episode really does kind of, you know, I know what you mean, but it does get its footing. And it does kind of, it really, if you were wondering about the events of the first season, it directly addresses all of them. Every bit, every string that you were thinking of is directly addressed in the second season, which is cool. And that's something that, like you were saying, like based on the first episode, you would think like something's weird about this, but it kind of goes like this, and then
right. Because it's like, because like the chess pieces have moved since we last saw the board. It's like, that's what I was trying to say about the timeline. It's like the things that were happening last year happened, and then 6 months, they mentioned it, 8 months, something like that. But it feels like more time has passed than that, than the way people are acting. But I don't know, maybe the timeline will kind of tighten up now that the storyline seems to be moving forward. It's not catching you back up. But yeah, wonky timelines. There's a show we've been watching. Nikki's been watching it more than me, but I've been kind of watching it over her shoulder. The Dr. Death, the Peacock show.
Oh wow, yeah, that show is nuts.
But the timeline, I feel like it's unnecessarily like just jumps back and forth without really any lyrical reason for it. It's just kind of like, oh, this.
Yeah,
like I can tell from the wigs like what age people are supposed to be.
Because you're like, who? That's the lady that gets hurt in the other part that they're talking about. Why is she? I agree, but it's such a good show. Like that's how you know a show is solid, when it has weird timeline, weird continuity things, and you're still like, I have to see the next episode. I don't care what they're doing. I just need to know what's happening.
I really like Pacey.
Yeah.
I mean, he's great in that show too.
Yeah.
He's so good in that show.
Yeah.
And from Fringe, I mean, he was so
for sure.
Like that was the show where I was like, oh, okay, this guy's a real actor. He's not just whatever I thought of Dawson's Creek kind of had, washed off of him. It wasn't just melodrama. He's actually good with characters, but also, who's fun for me to watch. I haven't watched Mr. Robot. So for me, this is the first time in a while I've been able to watch a good Christian Slater performance, but he's really fun to watch and seems to be having fun. And also him and Alec Baldwin, they have a lot of scenes together, and that stuff it's usually pretty good, It's not quite like a great show, but it definitely chugs along, and it's really well made. And episodes end with that feeling of I got to watch the next one for sure. So
I think you would love Mr. Robot.
But morning show. Just to rope you back in, Steve. It's more of the same. If you liked the first season, it's the same tone, same. It's like I think they're going to get at some pretty big stuff. Just like the first season got at some pretty big issues. It feels like I don't know if you've watched more than me, Ronald, but it feels like they're teeing up 2020 so that they can deal with a lot of stuff.
I've watched quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
It gets real. It gets real. And it's outside of the things. It's directly related. This isn't a spoiler, right? Like it's dealing with the events of during lockdown and COVID when that stuff starts. Like it kind of, if you aren't prepared, it might give you a little bit of like I don't know, like some nightmares, man.
Like trigger you or something.
Trigger you pretty bad. Cause I remember like where I was about to go to Paris. Like I was about to ignore everybody, and we were about to go get stuck in another place. And it just, I know,
I said, Ronald, what's up? And you said, ooh la la, and you slapped me in the face. And you got on a bike. And you rode off on a bike with a beret on. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
To wait in line for the whatever it was, croissants or whatever it was.
Yeah. But it's a really good show. It'll trigger you for sure. For sure will trigger you. But it does it in a way that feels very like, I don't know, man. They have a good balance of like shocking and like the morality surrounding it really feels like they're handling it in a good way. So morning show.
Well, it's like it takes those moral issues seriously. And I think that's something that can be very corny or cheesy, but this show happens to be, like I said before, it's just got this pace and general production value to it that makes it fun. Well, I mean, again, if you saw the first season, you know what it's like. But for our listeners, if you haven't seen it or have been putting it off, I feel like it's a binge. It's one of those shows that you will start to go, oh, maybe this is okay. And then once you're a couple episodes in, it just is like, okay, how much time do I have?
Yes. Yeah. Man, if we haven't said it enough, get into the Apple TV Plus stuff. I know that
shit over there.
It's really hard because there's so much stuff happening at once, like all these streaming services. But Apple TV is trying to do something that feels a little more avant-garde. I know that sounds weird. But think like HBO. Think, that sort of level of stuff. And Apple has a very specific vision of how they're trying to go for stuff. So
who else has a kind of passion project attitude? I think about the shows they put on, just as a little sidebar.
Mm-hmm.
I was noticing this. I think both AMC and FX seem to put on a lot of shows that are developed with that same eye towards like, we just want to put this on. Like they want to stand behind something. They don't always keep a show on the air, but I just recently watched the first episode of Why the Last Man. And that was also one where like the tone of the show comes out, but you can feel the development process. That was one that had a tortured process being brought to the screen with how long it took and with the cast changes, and it was on, it was off, it had different teams. And finally it comes out and it's a really self-assured, hour of television and you go, oh yeah, this is that, it's a development process that I guess you go through. I can't remember if that FX or AMC that's got Why the Last Man. FX, because I saw it on Hulu. But yeah, I think the first couple episodes are up. I only watched the first one, but it's very simple setup. It's almost like the non-comedy version of The Last Man on Earth, if you liked that Fox show. But also it's got elements of a lot of kind of dystopian things we've seen, but the tone of it is they've updated the comic. In the comic, there's an event that leaves just one human man and one male monkey alive, and every other living creature that's male on the planet has been wiped out by this weird event. And they've done an interesting thing with the show. It's Why the Last Man, but they've said on the show that now we know that there are, because the premise of the comic was that the Y chromosome was the thing, but it's like, well, now we know that that's not where it's divided, So in this story, there are other men who would not have died because they didn't have the Y chromosome, but there's also women who died because they did have the Y chromosome. So I mean, it's putting it in a very much more contemporary world in terms of the gender spectrum and the way it's dealing with it. And I think, at least that's what I've read. The first episode doesn't have a lot of that in it, but with the cast of characters that the comics had, and with the ability of a show to be like a perfect way to adapt a series of graphic novels, there's so much, like you have like a storyboarded story right there. I think the show has the potential to be really, really cool, and maybe something that people are talking about as it really gets into the nitty gritty.
Oh man, that's exciting.
Nice. I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, I saw that the first 3 were posted, so I'm
I didn't know that. I just noticed that it said Hulu, next on. You know how you're watching something and it gives you the next on, and you're like, oh, there's more, and then when it gives you next on, and it's some shit you watched a month ago that you stopped watching, and it takes you back to that.
That's
and you're
the
like,
worst.
No more.
Oh man,
Castle Rock and Blackish are the 2 shows that come up in our thing that we like put on. Like, I think we watched a couple episodes of Blackish and they just are in the middle of them and it picks up where we left off. It's like, what a good memory you have, Hulu, but I don't need you to do that. And then Castle Rock, we watched it, but it kept putting us back in that second season that goes off the rails a bit with Annie Wilkes. And it just, I don't know, it's just the kind of thing that makes you want to run for the remote when you're like, I don't want to watch this again.
Yeah. That's hilarious, man.
Anyway, so you wanted to talk about some physical media, I believe, Ronald.
Yes.
What is physical media?
Physical media is a disc, a circular data disc where a laser hits it and reads the data, and it's pretty cool.
And what's the data in this case?
Movies.
Yeah.
3 in particular. The 2 I want to talk about first. The Thing. Universal just released a 4K UHD of The Thing. Now, here's the thing. If you've seen this movie, if you know how beautiful it is, you know how beautiful it is. But this does something really different, man. Like, it's incredibly... The color spectrum on this show, on this movie is just deep. The whites are white. The blacks are black. The sound is intense. So here's why I've been starting to mess with physical media a little more. You'll stream something on a service, and sometimes you notice there's some aliasing. Like say if you're watching a black scene, like a scene in the dark, and the blacks don't look quite as good as they could look. It's not your fault. It's not your TV's fault a lot of the times. It's typically the streaming service. The bit rate is low. So it basically typically is a smaller movie that's upscaled to your TV screen. And sometimes that can compromise the picture. So I had this idea. So we have 4K TVs. Why don't I start getting things that are a little higher quality? Uncompressed sound, uncompressed video. And The Thing is so worth it. And I'm not saying if you're not into like collecting things, rent it from the library. Get it from Target on a sale. This is worth seeing. You have never seen this movie with this level of sharpness. And you think that since a movie is from the 80s, that it would be not as crispy as it is, but it is crisp.
It's crispy.
It was crispy. Ooh, it is beautiful. Crispy. When those monsters come out, You
crisp.
feel it. You
No,
feel it.
you'll see stuff that you haven't seen before too. Like
Yes,
I know
man.
with Black Christmas, I just watching the Blu-ray, and I had watched it on streaming. Or am I getting this? There was some point where I watched an HD, like a new transfer of that, and it was like a true HD. It wasn't like an upscaled HD.
Right.
It may have been on a streamer, but still, it was like it was a copy that I had not seen before. And I feel like it must have been my Blu-ray copy, but I was just shocked at like things I could see in the background and details that I had not seen before. And I was like, oh yeah, you don't think about what you're missing a lot of the time when you just go to whatever the streaming service is and watch, some movie that looks pretty good because it's HD. And you're like, well, this is about as good as, like you said, Ronald, this movie from the 80s, like Black Christmas, is 1974.
Right.
It can still look better. It can still be more attractive to your eyes. So no, I think that's and The Thing. Yeah, what a great movie to see in that format, because it is like both the sort of limits of the technology and the beauty of what they were able to do. That, like, you watch that movie now and you see just it's like one of those movies that feels like it's the height of a certain kind of practical effects, especially for the genre, especially for horror.
Yeah, it's unreal. Like, you forget. I mean, you can see Wilford Brimley's like hair on his chest, like you could see it kind of moving in the wind. It's just crazy how detailed it is. It's worth seeing, especially
you haven't lived until you've seen that.
You haven't lived, especially when you have those nice TVs. I keep saying this, but you have those nice TVs. Spoil yourself every once in a while. Rent one. You don't have to buy it. Go to like Redbox or something. Get a 4K UHD film and look at it. It is transformative. And the second one that I saw was Black Widow. And let me tell you why I stepped up to the physical media. It came out on Disney Plus, and I kept hearing on Reddit, the nerds, well, it's not quite as clear if you watch it. The Atmos sound is not quite as good, and the channel distribution and the highs and the lows. And I was like, okay.
Did we get the rights to play that audio from Reddit?
I know.
Yeah, I just stole the audio.
If you're
from
listening
Reddit.
to this, you might think Ronald did that voice, but he actually has audio. It's the new audio version of Reddit.
Yeah. This
it's in beta right now.
This text to speech but if you want to experience Black Widow at home and you want it, Disney Plus, the version of it is really nice. So I'd say if you want to step up your game, get it on either Apple, or if you want to get a physical copy, get it from Redbox or something and watch it. It is gorgeous. It is gorgeous. If you have a good sound bar, it's gonna sound amazing. It has Atmos, and it actually not the best Atmos, but it really does sound really good. The front channels, lots of gunshots, the dialogue isn't like crazy with the explosions. It's a nice little mix. Okay. Disney is weird, man. Like I feel like every time I watch. Now, can I ask you guys a question? When you watch something on Disney Plus, do you have to crank it up?
I think so.
I have to crank it. Everything that I watch on Disney Plus, I just watched What If. I had to crank it up to like normally a 20 for like Hulu and Netflix. On Disney Plus, I typically have to put it on like a 30, 35 for me to hear the audio and not lean into it.
That's weird. Yeah, I feel like that's something in the platforms, because I do notice that, and that's not necessarily with Disney Plus, but I just noticed that like when you go between like Netflix and Hulu, or even on Hulu between the programming and the commercials, like the sound of that stuff is so inconsistent. But that's a side note. But
yeah, but definitely worth checking out. 4K UHD, beautiful. And the last one I'm going to talk about is a Dario Argento. Am I saying that right? Dario Argento.
I think so.
Okay, so this man
could be Dario. I don't know.
Dario. Okay, and I also need help with this genre pronunciation.
I think you got it right. I think you said it right before.
Jello.
It's Jello.
Are you saying Jello? Like, do I want
no Jello? Giallo?
Giallo. Oh, Giallo.
I think it's Giallo. I think you kind of put a
Giallo.
little spin on it.
Oh,
Or maybe it's,
okay.
I'll look up for why don't you talk about it?
Okay, so
I'll be doctor, look him up.
Dario Argento is the godfather of this genre of film. So think like horror, mystery, POV sort of view. Kind of you've seen it a lot in like Friday the 13th and used in the earlier Nightmare on Elm Streets and stuff like that. There's normally investigation. There's normally a lot of women getting killed and one person trying to figure out who this mass murderer is. So this is like a very popular genre that started in, I'd say like the 60s is when it really started to kick off. Suspiria is one of his more popular movies of the genre. And it will kind of relate to the main movie that we're going to talk about, where it's kind of an homage to this sort of genre of film. But I saw The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is essentially this Italian city where these women are murdered by a masked man, and there's an investigator trying to solve the murder. It's interesting because some of the dialogue is in English. Some of the people are speaking English. Some people are speaking Italian. Some people are speaking other languages, and they're all speaking their language. But you could tell there's some dubbing, but you can read the lips and see that they're not. They're all speaking different languages. It's very interesting, and I think that's how we shot it. Dario was one of those guys that was like, if this person's good, it doesn't matter what language they speak. They're going to speak their language in the movie, and we'll just add subtitles if need be. It's a 4K UHD, and I think it comes from a 2K digital. Comes from a digital source. Yeah, a 2K digital intermediate. And this is gorgeous, man. Like if you want to see an old movie look gorgeous, Arrow, look no further than Arrow, a UK company that is just pumping out these incredible restorations. Physical media at its best. That's my third, man. But yeah, Giallo?
It's Giallo.
Giallo. Okay, so
it's Giallo. And I think you had the name correctly too. I think it's just Dario.
Yeah, okay. So Dario Argento and Giallo horror films. And
I just want to say that the little pronunciation thing that I played was doing like a real authentic thing. So it was like Dario Argento. So you could do that thing that newscasters sometimes do with like a Spanish name where they really, Spanish out on it. But anyway, yes. Bird with the Crystal Plumage is one of those movies that people talk about when they talk about like proto slasher, proto modern thriller. It's one of those that when you see it, it's worth seeing for that alone. But it also is very, I can only imagine this. A beautiful transfer of it is nice to look at. But his colors were always he always had kind of almost like a gaudy, or he could go there with the kind of bright colors and and they're kind of garish and I don't know, that definitely is like a formative movie for the horror genre in a way. It's just one of those ones that people name check when they talk about the movies that came before what we think of as like the traditional kind of modern horror, American horror slasher type film. Those movies were sort of, floating around out there. They all have a little piece of what would later become part of the genre. And he was definitely one of the kind of inventors of some of that stuff.
If you watch his movies, you see like all the influence in like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even some of the like POV views, just kind of like he's a big fan of watching someone gets the murderer stabbing and the victim kind of reacting and then blood going everywhere and yeah, it's interesting. So like it takes some getting used to. I'd say if you want to start off crazy, go Suspiria, because I've kind of grown to love that movie. Didn't really like the new one. In fact, I love to see Steve squirm as that movie played. It just was unbearable. It was an unbearable movie. But specifically watching Steve melt down beside me, he was like losing his shit. It's
It's definitely one that we'll always remember.
It's an awful remake, but the original is definitely worth checking out. And yeah. That's my physical media review. Check those three out. The thing I'd make a priority, make that a priority, especially if you haven't seen it before, or if you haven't seen it in a while. So yeah, man.
Weren't you kind of you were kind of segueing into Malignant? I wanted to hear how that was going to
Okay, so it's been said that the film that we're going to cover is a homage to this genre of movie. Everywhere that I looked when I saw the early reviews, they're just like, Dario homage, Giallo homage, and this seems to be an homage to that genre. This is James Wan's Malignant, a HBO Max theater simultaneous release that came out last week, and has been met with a lot of controversy, man. I think this film is people are kind of on the fence about it.
It's like an actual conversation piece. Every now and then one of these movies comes out and you can find people hating it for the same reason that other people love it. It's like, and you can tell when that's like part of the movie itself is that some people are reacting to the very same thing in a negative light that other people are saying, oh my God, I loved that about this movie. Right. So and that just makes it like, I couldn't wait to talk to you guys about this movie, but you should get us started, Steve.
Would you deem it controversial or just like conversational?
I'd say controversial.
I would say divisive.
Okay.
I would say divisive.
Yeah, I'd say divisive. I say controversial just because, like, I think sometimes when horror films sometimes have a one size fits all, specifically for like the more popular films. James Wan's film is going for something very specific, and if you aren't on board, I feel like you'll be tortured for 2 hours.
Right. The reason I ask is like that line of thought is accurate. I agree with you. And I think that like it's kind of what makes it even more, I don't want to say shocking, because like I'm probably on the side that like, enjoyed the movie more than most people did. And I feel like what's a little more shocking about it is like what you're describing just now about like the feelings of certain horror films is that like James Wan is kind of like a poster boy for a lot of those movies. Like you look at what he's done and like, what he's done to shepherd like Saw and Insidious and The Conjuring, like all these, I mean, I don't know what each of them has done, but billions of dollars at the box office. And, a lot of mainstream moviegoers, like, if you ask 10 people, like, what's your favorite like horror movie of the past 10 years, there's a really good chance that a lot of people will say something maybe from one of those three franchises, especially the mainstream audiences. So I think that's even more, that's what makes this more of a conversation, I think, is the fact that it is from James Wan, who has made, some of the more popular and some of the better horror movies of the last 10 plus years. And, is definitely one of the most successful filmmakers working today. And I think that is kind of what afforded him the opportunity to make this movie to begin with, obviously.
Oh, definitely.
Especially coming off of like, $1 billion Aquaman movie and, doing, what did he do? Furious 7? Did he do 7? Yeah, I think he did the 7. The one that was the one that Paul Walker passed away during. But I mean, this guy's made billions of dollars for these studios and, specifically WB. He's done a lot with them, with the horror genre and with Aquaman. So, we talked about this a lot over the last, year, even like talking about these movies that were coming day and date, him having a movie to be one of them, and just kind of being, we talk about James Wan, we talk about, Mike Flanagan, we talk about who's our other horror, Jordan Peele, these directors in the genre space that we just love, and like it's just immediately you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna watch it, whether it's good, we'll figure that out. But like I've already bought my ticket for these movies, so I think that's really what makes it so interesting, because it does feel like a bit of a flex, for somebody being able to make whatever they wanted to make because of box office success from prior movies. And like, obviously he's heavily influenced by these movies, this genre that you're describing. and there's been traces of it in some of his other movies too. And I think what's also interesting is that, like, whatever homage this is to that genre, this movie also is really a James Wan movie still as well.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much of this movie that really made me feel like a lot of like Saw was like, I felt like was all over this movie.
To the point of like, I mean, again, and we're going to talk spoilers later, so don't worry, folks. We might refer to the tone of this movie. We might say something like about the third act having some crazy stuff in it, but we're not going to say any more than that. But I would say that this movie, like, and to the point where I'm actually wrestling with, I don't know how much of this movie is self-parody, like deliberate self-parody, because so much of this stuff is the James Wan stuff kind of amped up. Like, and there are weird little improbable things. Like, there's like an establishing shot of this old hospital. I think it's an old hospital. That's like a fucking Transylvanian castle, And the opening scene is like something out of, I don't know, like Darkman or something. I mean, there's these weird, or like the Doc Ock scenes with the operation room and stuff. Sam Raimi kind of feel. So I don't know. I just kind of feel like this movie is sort of all over the place, and I'm not taking anything away from James Wan to say, though, that there's no trace of that kind of prankster playfulness necessarily in his earlier movies. I think that what we saw before was his glee with like amping things up and surprising people. And like you said, whether you like Saw or not, that movie kind of defined horror for a certain number of years. Insidious, a movie that I think I like a lot more now than I did when it first came out, but definitely set the tone for a certain kind of movie, and also was very successful in its own right. And then you have the Conjuring films, which is like a mega franchise, So obviously he does have these ways of like seeing where the genre is going. But what he's made here is a movie that like is marketed to get you in the door as this is the next James Wan exploration of horror. And what he's actually presenting is something that I think it's almost hilarious how much like traditional horror fans could be put off by like how this movie goes. This movie does not really try to scare you. I think there are a couple of moments that play pretty scary, but outside of that, it made me think much more of the sort of quasi thriller action mixture that you got like in Lee Whannell's Invisible Man movie. In fact, it has a lot in common with that movie in a certain way, plot wise. There's certain beats, but it's so much so that I felt like this movie was doing an amped up self-parody that even my own reaction the first time through of going like, I don't know if I'm buying this. This is kind of silly, or this is kind of dumb or whatever. And then going, but there were little hints of them knowing what they're doing. I don't know. I think there were certain things that didn't work for me about this thing and certain things that did, but it's definitely it's a James Wan movie through and through. It's an interesting movie for James Wan to make because he could be burning up some of his like straight horror cred with the people who kind of came into this wanting either another Conjuring or another Insidious,
Right.
If you were careful, you did notice like this trailer though did hold back. The way this film was marketed, it really just sold you on James Wan, sold you on certain imagery. So you knew there was something coming, some twist, some surprise. And then I think this movie is like, oh, you wanted like a twist and a surprise? Well, we'll keep, things that you might have been able to guess, and especially if like me, you've read a lot of horror fiction, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in horror fiction that they never put in horror movies, because in order for audiences to stay like bought into it, you kind of have to cut down on a certain amount of schlocky kind of crazy stuff. But this goes into that zone. It's kind of like the way Matrix, when it came out, if you were a sci-fi fan, you already knew about the kind of brain in a jar philosophy of like a false reality, and you don't know what your physical being is actually doing. I think this movie takes certain things that like horror fans might be familiar with though, and like thrusts it into this. It's a $40 million movie. I mean, this is not a cheap movie. This is a James Wan movie. This is totally the movie they let you make if you're in between Aquamans for a big studio. And they're like, go have fun. Because this movie really doesn't seem like it's, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about the cinema score, but this seems like the kind of movie that could have a really low cinema score simply because the trailer plays it straight and the movie is not. It's not straight down the middle at all. You looking at
I think it was I think it had a C cinema score.
Okay, so
which is not as bad as it could have been. I mean, like,
You've
got Hereditary and like movies like that got like D's or whatever it was, like historically like low. But I mean, just a quick note. Let's also just pay some respect, because Insidious is the start of this podcast.
I know. That's one of, I've there's
It all
one
starts with Insidious.
there's one scare in that I've always thought was great, the monster behind the crib. And I've come to terms with other things about it. I think I like all the actors in it more now than I did when that movie came. I don't know. There's just something about certain movies, you've come towards them in your aesthetic or I think I would enjoy that one more now. I also think Malignant, even though, like I said, it didn't necessarily work for me overall, I also thought, man, this would have been so much more fun in a crowded theater rather than sitting there watching it with my wife, who admittedly is not that much of a horror fan. And so her reaction a lot of time is like, kind of the questions I'm saying about that this movie's going to make you ask, even if you are a horror fan, which is this trying to be funny? Is this trying to be goofy? And I also think that some better acting in a couple of places would have helped. I found the lead very dreary, and I just didn't think she just didn't really register for me. And I also thought the two cops, the female cop was a little bit better, but it just felt half baked. All the stuff with the cops at the station. In fact, the way the cops come in and the conversations they had, it felt like a 10-year-old's idea of what cops would say when they come into a crime scene. It's like, is he our guy? Looks like it's our guy. Boy, I've kind of got a crush on you. Oh, you. I mean, it just felt silly. And I think you can have silliness in a schlocky movie like this. I'm just saying, I think had the acting been like really good, a lot of those elements would have just been amazing in a movie that's willing to go there. Because this movie is really, I mean, you've seen what I mean about the genre stuff, Steve. It's like, it's really not trying to hit the usual notes that this type of movie tries to hit.
And it does feel like, I mean, like there is a question of like intent and whether some, and I kind of feel like I fall on like the intentional piece. Like I really do feel like some of this feels pretty intentional, like really kind of playing into the genre that Ronald's given us the history on. It's like some of those movies in this genre really do feel like this movie does, like, very like poor acting and like overacting, and like even like some of the blocking and the shot setups are kind of like not like what you normally see in some of James Wan's movies, even though you still do hear and feel like his voice in this film. I don't know. I kind of have coming away from it for a few days. I'm just like, I've kind of settled into like it feeling like those movies that I would pull off of a shelf in a video store, like because it had a cool cover, and I'm like, wow, that's like kind of like not a great movie, but I kind of really dug it.
Right.
And I don't know that I'm that high on this, but I'm definitely not in the idea of like that was like horrible, or like this divisiveness that we mentioned earlier, like that you can see on film Twitter or wherever you're looking. I definitely kind of fall more towards the middle positive side of it, of like, I definitely had fun watching the movie. That's for sure. And
I've seen so many people say that they laughed and that they were like, what the hell? Like that. I mean, you would love, it would have been really fun with a crowd. Like, even not loving it, I thought, oh, wow, this would have been fun. These moments, you could just hear people reacting to some of these scenes. I'm sure we'll talk about them in a second when we get into spoilers, but like those beats that feel like that must have been what they were going for, like that kind of roller coaster ride effect.
Ronald, how does this fit into the Giallo genre?
It fits right in. So here's my thing. I thought I was gonna hate this movie, and something else happened.
I could tell. Yeah.
Something else happened. Like halfway through, there's no way that a guy with such a sure hand could make a movie like this and not intentionally make some of this campy. Like it just,
I kind of feel the same.
It felt so campy that it became so fun, and her acting was it felt intentionally kind of like, we need you to be like the intense eyes, always like colorless in the middle of everything being very colored. I fucking had a ball with this movie. I would show this movie to anyone if they wanted just a bunch of laughs, some adventure. The physicality of the villain in this movie is unreal. Yeah. Like I heard that they use practical effects. They got like a couple, 2 or 3 people that could actually move like that. Yeah. So there were parts where I'm like, that's not CGI, because like, there's a part where the villain kind of goes into a hole that doesn't look like CGI, and I'm like, I know the way light hits CGI.
Yeah, that stuff was cool.
Unreal. Then there was the blocking in some of the shots where like she's running around in the film and it almost feels like almost feels like the Royal Tenenbaums. Like it's blocked out like some of his movies. Like it's like I just thought that some parts of it were so fucking fun, man. Like I thought I would hate this movie. It felt like I should have hated it. And then in the end, I'm like, the third act, because I just felt a little over the top, especially the deaths just felt too crazy. Like it was like, it's like if you were watching a comedy and someone was describing somebody getting hurt, like the stabs were like it was like, come on, like this is nuts. It's nuts the way these people are dying.
Yeah, the brutality of that I thought was like, that was one of the few things that really felt giallo to me, was like the brutality, the sudden, like the kind of like mutilation of the people, the sort of like the killer with like a black gloved hand with a knife, all that stuff felt very, very giallo. I feel like it was missing that color palette that we were talking about.
Yes.
And it was missing some of that kind of art direction, but it did have that controlled style, and certain rooms seemed like they were set up for the sort of set pieces they became. Like the police station definitely felt like the police station in like an Italian, like in one of those giallo movies. I mean, where it's like, why is the set direction so interesting here? Or why is this art direct? Like this is one of those, it's like almost like something on the television show Hannibal or something, where it's like, this is not meant to look like a real police station. But then when you see what that room is going to be used for later in the movie, you go, oh, they were kind of giving us this big wide open space because there's a set piece coming. Which again, that's that James Wan thinking. I think he loves to do as much as he can with the space. And even in this one, almost to an absurd level, that house really made no sense. The layout of that house, like when she falls through the attic. Well, I'm not going to say anything more.
Here's another thing. A real question before we spoil anything. Did the villain have a black belt?
Some kind of thing. Some kind of skill set.
Did the villain have a black? Was the villain Bruce Lee?
Something like that.
Was the villain Jet Li?
Did you? Maybe you didn't see the end of the movie. It was none of those people. It was something different than that.
I don't want to spoil it for you, Ronald.
Man,
you should go watch it before we talk
for
about
real, man. Like I fucking love this movie.
Oh wow.
I should not have loved it. At the end, Steve and John, I was like, I went upstairs and talked to Aaron, and I was like, I want to spoil this movie for you so bad. But it was so crazy from start to finish.
We had it was so fun to watch. Like Aaron watched it with me when I think we watched it Saturday night, and like the whole time she was like, did not want to watch it. Like she does not love watching horror with me, especially like later at night. She gets really scared. But like, like John said, it's not really that scary. But I mean, she definitely was like pretty into the movie. Like the whole time we were like guessing. She was guessing and like, and you know, some of the commentary that we're saying now, like that looks weird, or was that supposed to look weird like that? Why are they parking on the side of a cliff like that?
Oh, that car that pulls up to the edge of the matte painting, it stops like right on the edge. See, that's what I mean though. That feels like they have to be like in the room where they're compositing that shot. Someone has to be like, you know, sometimes as a joke, we put together this really exaggerated composition that doesn't look, and it's like, because there's no reason to ever do that with your car. But yes, that's a great example of what I'm talking about. That I think you can say that can't be an accident because you have to do that. Yeah, I think already though people are giving too much. I mean, my one thing would be, I don't think it bugs me when like you can't say a criticism about a movie and without someone going, oh, I think that acting was supposed to be intentionally bad. That bugs me because it's like, no, I think the version of the movie that had a more dynamic lead would have been better. It would have been more. It would have been more what this is trying to be. I don't think there's any reason why you would say, let's have a lead that is a vacuum of charisma. I don't ever think you would do that intentionally. And let's get some sort of amateur community theater folks to play the cops. I don't think you would do that unless, and you know, his new gal pal, his girlfriend is a wife. I didn't know that. But anyway, she's like got a story credit, and she's one of the like the forensics person who comes.
Yeah, they wrote the bones of the script apparently, like together.
Well, but I mean, it's a total nepotism thing because her character is strangely written and poorly acted and doesn't really have a place in the movie. that stuff was really clunky as hell for me. However, the stuff we're talking about, that's like those James Wan camera moves, that aerial shot of the house where she's walking around and you're just kind of getting hypnotized almost by it. Like, it doesn't even make sense to lay the scenes out that way, but that's part of that giallo thing too. Don't you think, Ronald? There's
absolutely.
like excess. It's like, let's be excessive. Let's be excessive with the violence. In giallo, frequently you're excessive with the sexuality too, which nowadays you don't really see in horror movies, but like, there's something about also the way this movie, another thing that tips you off to the self-parody, the satirical aspect, that she doesn't just have an abusive husband. She has the most cartoonishly brutish abusive husband that's ever been. He, like, in shorthand, within 5 minutes, he's done 15 horrible things, and
dirty shirt. He has a dirty shirt. He's like super aggressive. He's like
laying around watching the game. Whatever he says to her about, like, she's had miscarriages, and he says something like, how many of my babies are going to have to die inside you? And it's like, and then he throws her against the wall and shit. I mean, it's like, I'm not saying that's funny, but I'm saying the over the topness of that is so like what we're talking about. That's the kind of shit this movie tries to pull. That's like, okay, you can tell they're not operating with the usual rules.
There's a part in the movie where there's an investigation happening after the chaos happens, and the cop asks her about the miscarriages in front of her, like she isn't there. She's just like, so I heard she's had 3 miscarriages. Is that what? And she's just laying down in the bed. What? It just, that stuff has to be intentional, man. Like, I don't think that he would make all these brilliantly put together movies, and then he's just like, no, I'm gonna make this as campy.
I mean, I do think directors can get to that point where nobody's second guessing them, though, and they get to make a movie that doesn't go through the usual whatever.
That's true too. That's true.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think until we see James Wan in interviews talking about this movie and hearing stories about the making of it, I think that's when you'll determine, like, is it like a Tommy Wiseau situation where it's like, now that he knows people think it's funny, he's going to start to say, oh, I meant for it to be funny. But I think James Wan is a pretty direct guy. The only thing that I think is very interesting is that notion I expressed earlier, is like, what does this do to, like, his name as a straight horror guy? Maybe he doesn't give a shit about that anymore, or maybe he knows he gets to make his movies regardless, because at this point, if he wants to go off and make a $20 million horror film, he can do it. No one's going to stop it. But it is interesting that the studio played along and played it so straight with the marketing and everything, that even the commercials didn't tip their hand and say, like, this is crazy, this is wacky, this is wild. They all tried to play it like this is the scariest movie you've ever seen. Like, at least all the press I saw was like scary as hell and all that stuff.
And the weird stuff is that, like, we talked about this a little bit last week. Like, they didn't screen it, and you wonder, did they not screen it because, like, they didn't, like, think the reviews would be good, or they wanted to try to preserve some of the twists, or the real movie that was going to be released. but also it's kind of weird that, like, you like you just kind of were saying, John, like, him talking about it, like he didn't really do much press for this movie at all. Like, there wasn't really much press at all, and he usually is pretty visible when some of his movies are coming out, whether it's interviews or feature articles or podcasts, whatever. He usually kind of is seen a bit because he kind of is his own brand. He's not just like some directors who kind of fade into the back. Like, he's out there sometimes. So I don't know. It's interesting. Like, there's a little featurette that he's in on the HBO Max playlist at the end. You can watch. It's very brief, but I mean, like, that's the extent of, like, anything I've seen him talking about this movie, which I would like to see some more, but I haven't really seen many things that he's done in terms of interviews, just flat out discussing the production or the intent or what his goal was with the movie. But yeah, I don't know. That's probably what we can say, before going into spoilers. I mean, I would definitely recommend checking it out. I mean, I think, with the expectation that, this is not a straight, like Ronald mentioned at the top, like, I don't feel like really anybody should, go in thinking that it's like a straightforward, like, new slasher horror epic that, if you listen to this podcast and, like, anything that we're saying sounds interesting, like, definitely check it out. And I mean, I I would still be curious to recommend it to people just to have a discussion about it with them afterwards, like just for the good conversation, which is what I was saying earlier. Like, this is like a guaranteed conversation. Like, it's not just like, did you like it? Oh, me too. End of conversation. Like,
there's
it's
no
gonna
way.
be like it's gonna be a 10-15 minute talk after you talk to anybody who's seen it probably. But yeah, I would definitely, it's something I would definitely recommend checking out. But
yeah, when I first saw it,
would you guys recommend it, or?
My initial reaction
Absolutely.
was if it had those better elements, the better acting, the sharper script, then I would be like recommending it to people as like a really fun kind of supernatural slasher type thing. But I think now that I've seen more people reacting to it, and I've seen so many people have latched onto the campy aspect of it, I would kind of up it to where you said, Steve, too. I would say, if you're a genre fan, you probably should check this one out, because people are going to be talking about it, and you need to have an opinion about it. But I also think that I've been impressed to see how many people at least have reported, that experience that you guys said, of like almost like in disbelief, laughing, enjoying this movie.
Yes. Yeah, there's a thing that I think can sometimes happen with people. I mean, none of you have expressed this, where like sometimes you talk to people about movies and it seems like they're too good for a movie like this. Like, it's too good to enjoy a movie that might not be it's not going to be like on your top 10 list necessarily. It might be on mine.
Yeah.
It might be on mine, just because I could bring people around to watch this movie and we will all be screaming.
Right.
As we watch it. That's the thing. Like, have we forgotten sometimes that that's what brings us to movies, is the feeling that you feel when you watch it, and not that is it high art, like, sure, I love that stuff. I love fucking artsy movies, but like,
hey, let's acknowledge you are Mr. A24. Okay.
Look, every time the shirt is in stock, it sells out.
They have the merch drop. Yeah.
I want the damn t-shirt. I am Mr. A24. We need to do this episode because more movies have come out at this point. Green Knight and Zola and stuff, but I love artsy movies, and this is fun as fuck. Like, are we getting into spoilers?
Let's do it. Let's say goodbye to our listeners who haven't seen the movie yet and don't want to have it spoiled for them. You have to go watch it and come back, or do what I suspect a lot of people do: just listen to the spoilers anyway, because they're here for us, not for these fucking films.
Yeah.
So-called films.
Or they just gave up on, like, I'm not going to watch this movie. I just need you to tell me everything.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so like, I think the opening of this movie tips you off that there's some kind of monster or creature or something. You can see something through the plastic that's hanging there, and you never forget that. I think that's another reason this movie plays on that level of letting you know that it's a little bit heightened, at least, because it doesn't start with the abusive husband and the dreary household and all that shit with the Impossible Four plan, and the attic that opens up onto the den that is basically straight up. Did you notice how high the ceiling was in that room that she falls? Anyway,
everything was so big in that house. Like, it was obviously big to shoot, but it was. She must have been a millionaire. It's very strange. This is $1 million house easily. This is like a.
But on the outside, very quaint. But anyway, so it opens with that scene that I think really was there to say, sort of tip off that this movie is playing with these kind of B movie, the schlockiness of the monster behind the curtain and the scientists saying we've got to stop it and all that stuff. It didn't even play that as straight as it could have. It could have played it like Stranger Things level kind of straight.
Right.
It didn't do that. It didn't try to make that creepy at all. So that is letting you know, but then the movie does throw you into this, what we might think is kind of a James Wan, not just the James Wan heroine and the kind of story, but like the opening sequence, even the opening credits. I don't know how much that was, but it felt very much like, a 90s going into 2000s kind of, I don't know if you noticed that, the style of the music and everything. And then they have throughout the movie, a slowed down, eerie version of,
that theme
of the Where's My Mind, the Pixies song, or at least that's what it kept sounding like to me. And I was like, oh, are they doing that as a self-knowing thing too? Because that's kind of a cliche in these movies, is to take up a rock song and slow it down and make it eerie. So I was thinking from the beginning, like, this movie is something different. But even though I never forgot the monster behind the curtain, I was sort of I keep saying impressed about this movie, but it really did, like, oh, they're going there when it comes to what the creature actually is, where the creature actually resides. You might have guessed there was something going on like that, but I feel like when you discovered, why don't you tell us, Ronald, what is who's the killer? This is a whodunit. You were talking about one of the traits of a giallo is trying to figure out who did it. That's an early slasher trope too. Who is it? We find out close to the end, right? Who the killer is, and it's.
Can I tell you what I thought it was first?
Yes,
I thought it was just a twin. I thought this was like a situation where an adoption situation. One got adopted.
Separated.
They're separated at birth.
I mean, you're right. In the Obi-Wan Kenobi sense of from a certain point of view, it is a twin.
But little did we know, this person existed on her back. There was a person essentially residing in she had
a teratoma, and like in real life, the teratoma is when you have like a cyst, and it's got the twin that you absorbed in it, and it'll have sometimes like teeth or eyelashes or hair growing inside the cyst. It's gross, but this movie's view of that is what if a teratoma was like a little? It's kind of like Belial from the film Basket Case too. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it's a very similar plot arc as far as how that's handled. But yes, it's the twin that was attached and now has been removed, or maybe they haven't been removed. Where's this twin been hiding all this time, Ronald?
Basically tucked in her head, essentially, right? They like cut off a portion in her brain and have been controlling her thoughts. So essentially, I
love the shot of them pushing the brain. When they're explaining it, there's like a side shot of them like squeezing the brain. It was like we couldn't remove it all. What was
crazy glue?
It was like the eyes or some of the facial features of the twin, the vestigial twin. We couldn't remove those without removing parts of your brain because it's grown into your brain. So then, just like boop, like someone trying to tuck. Like it's that thing where like you're putting sheets back in a drawer, but you're not folding them. You're just kind of stuffing them.
Or like Christmas, where you realize, oh shit, I don't have enough wrapping paper to go all the way around the box. So I'm just gonna press this in and then kind of.
We're gonna do a wrapping paper graft on top of this.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize we saw the triggering incident of this when her abusive husband throws her against the wall. Yeah. We didn't realize in the movie we were watching the moment when this happens. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
That's pretty cool.
Because after that, very shortly after that is when Gabriel, who also for some reason can magically talk to you through the radios and make lights.
Yeah.
There's no explanation of that part, right?
No explanation for it.
He's just a mutant. Well, he also has super strength. Don't they allude to that later? That he's been like absorbing strength and she's able to use his strength.
That ties into your is he Bruce Lee, Jet Li, whatever.
Right.
Because like it doesn't
what kind
matter.
Of training did he get?
He just is.
Also very weird when Gabriel kind of went crazy in the hospital and she's trying to talk, the sister's trying to talk to a cop. She's like, look, her husband slammed her head against the wall and How did she know that Gabriel got activated? How could she ever have known? She guessed the plot of the entire situation right there in the hospital and kind of just gave it to us. And little did we know, the nasty, gruesome thing that we were watching in the beginning credits was the surgery of him being removed from her body. That's what it was, because they played it back later on in the movie.
All those weird close-ups and like fleshy stuff. Yeah. Again, a very like, I feel like every movie had kind of a disgusting opening credit sequence like that. Well, like maybe it was after 7 or some movie influenced everybody to have like enigmatic, creepy close-ups of kind of, disturbing shit. So that felt like a throwback too.
And when Gabriel comes from her head, the hair from the back of her head kind of drapes over Gabriel and looks very scary. And he has like a kind of scowl to his, you can't really see much. It just is kind of a fleshy.
It's his brain face. He's a brain-faced boy. And he's like the awkward movements that earlier we might have wondered, why does he move that way? We now realize it's because he's
walking backwards.
He's a backwards person.
Yeah, he's a backwards person. So
that actually was cool.
I thought it was so cool, man.
Like earlier in the movie, like when you know what's going on, or you see the twist, and then when you see those subsequent scenes of like, when he kind of takes her over, it it connects the dots of like, those movements that you're seeing, like you were describing earlier, Ron, like some of the practical stunts they did with like someone who could like recreate running backwards, or like when he pulls her arms out and like almost looks like they like dislocate in reverse.
Oof.
Like that kind of stuff. I thought that stuff was like actually really cool. And like before, again, the point of that was like before the twist, that's like an odd thing that you're like, well, what is that? Like, is that a creature? Like, because you're thinking like, is it like you're saying, like, is it a twin that's just like a slasher, or is this like some supernatural creature? Or it's just I think it's a interesting decision, because it does kind of keep you guessing, and it kind of really contributes to that, like that mystery element of like, is it human, non-human, supernatural, whatever. And I don't think they ever really settle on one or the other, because like even though what it is, and it's a pretty practical thing that for this movie it sort of works, but the other elements of like the radio and the power and the kung fu and like the power, the lights flashing up, and I mean you just say because that's all. That's
because it's a horror movie, and also maybe there is some suggestion that this teratoma twin had some kind of mutant powers or some kind of psychokinetic something. Yeah. It's never explained, but it's like we're definitely in the realm where if you're buying all this other stuff to say, oh, he's also got some kind of psychic ability that can affect electricity, or he can, they didn't bother over explaining why he can talk through the radio. So maybe we should be thankful about that, to say like, we accidentally threw a radio in your head too. Like they didn't try to explain that. But I do think that, it sort of works just on horror movie rules of like, well, this is just the kind of creepy shit that happens, and we're going to use radios in this movie.
I think the mother even makes a comment about him being like, it's a vague comment, like him being an abomination, and like some other phrase that she says that like probably in someone's mind is enough to say that'll explain why he can talk to the radio, or like control the lights.
And do
but
karate.
It's also set up for a sequel very easily. I mean, there's this woman falls and hurts her head, and boom, Gabriel's back. So, and it's set up
this
at the
time
end.
She'll be ready.
Right. But I mean, that feels totally like a here comes part two kind of vibe. Yeah. But this movie, we should say, back to our earlier discussion, it's, I feel like calling movies flops in this climate is strange, but underperformed might be the word you would use. This movie underperformed at the box office in the same way that like Suicide Squad did. It's just they were expecting more from this thing. So I don't know. I mean,
underperformed on HBO Max as well. Like,
really? I haven't heard those numbers.
The opening weekend had about 700,000 streams, which is not good. I mean, they typically, they normally aim for 1 million or over the weekend, for especially a new movie that's a day and date theater HBO Max release, and it had 700,000 streams, which is like a real flop. Like, unfortunately,
but this is one that I feel like catches on, whether it's weeks
too.
or months from now, but years from now. I think this is one that really is going to have like a very passionate following an audience that is going to champion it for a bit. Yeah, I think it only did 5.5 million or something like that.
That's
which is bad. Yeah. But
I really, at some point, I hope that we can get James Wan. I don't know how we can do it, but I'm gonna try to get James Wan. We're gonna get James Wan on here.
You're saying you James Wan Tim on the show?
yes, and I need to find out why he gave that little man karate skills.
I want to find out whose idea it was.
That's really bothering you
to put the
so good.
in the doctor's house, the lady doctor that gets killed, on her mantle of trophies. John. There's a trophy that says "Excellence in Surgery."
Another point of this had to be intentional.
I mean, again, now that we've said all these things, it's like, that's because that's like almost like an airplane movie level, like of like parody. Yeah. But like there are, you have to believe that at least that kind of thinking was going into this movie. So it's like, whereas you might normally think, I think that it's a peril. I think anytime you watch a movie and you think you're smarter about the movie than the people that made the movie, it's dangerous. It might be, there are some movies that are made by people that aren't as smart as they think they are,
Right.
and James Wan, I think, is a smart guy who sometimes makes kind of gut level movies that might be kind of dumb to some folks, but kind of, they hit you on that level. And I think that, like, when he's at his most successful, it's all those elements, his cinematic sensibility, his camera work, his everything. And so, yeah, I think that you like, it's almost like you could take it two ways. He doesn't have a lot in his history to indicate that he would make a movie that was this much of a satire of what it's trying to do. But
Right.
he also, like you said, Ronald, he hasn't made a lot of movies that are like incompetently put together. So somewhere between those two, somewhere in that Venn diagram, there's a movie that really could only be made by James Wan. And I think that is something we come back to again and again when we talk about filmmakers that we admire or the types of movies we admire. So it's almost like you can love James Wan or hate him, but you kind of have to begrudgingly tip your hat that he made a full-on James Wan movie that is like a very strange movie for a guy at this point in his career who's made the movies he's made to make this. Yeah. This, again, whether you want to say controversial, divisive, whatever, but just this, a movie that could really miss people with its tone, and people could really be like, not here for this type of movie, That's
seems like that. Yeah, it's kind of what
I kind of even, I think I dig that even more than I do the movie. I dig that. I dig that the James Wan-ness of it, that he's.
I think I wanted to mention I think what might be one of my favorite sequences in the movie, and one of those ones where you're just like, huh, was when she's with her sister and she's telling her about how she's adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that she says that she was adopted, the sister's face has like,
yes!
like, and then it cuts to an aerial view of Seattle at night with like an Evanescence song playing or something.
Oh, and I'm just like, what? Right. No, it felt like,
did my HBO Max just glitch out or something?
Yeah,
like that
it was so weird.
And but then, I mean, and again, I'm not trying to give too much credit here. When you realize who the person is in that next scene, it's the mother.
Yeah.
It kind of
yeah
sort of ties to, I don't know.
No, you're right though. That felt like a really weird edit, and it felt like, wow, are they demonizing adoption? Like there's this weird thing of like, wow, you're she's adopted. Like, boom.
Yeah.
I have a theory, man. This is what I was gonna say to you guys earlier. Remember how we saw Drive, Nicholas Winding Refn, we're like, man, can't wait to see what he has next. And then Only God Forgives came out. And he was like, you thought you liked me? Fuck you.
Now, I thought of that repeatedly with this movie because Steve very famously like hated that movie. And you and I were doing the, we think this was intentional conversation. And we had some version of that. Just because it's intentional, does that mean it's valid? And like, you know what I mean? Like that discussion of like, if a filmmaker is trying to intentionally blow up their own reputation in a movie, like, do you have to salute that, And I think in that movie, we kind of came down on the side of, no, you don't really have to salute it if you're not having fun with it, no matter how deliberate the director was. Oh, I wanted you to dislike it. Like that doesn't matter. On some level, you could still say that's bad. And I think this movie is a hell of a lot more fun in some ways to watch than Only God Forgives. But I had the same thought, Ronald. I was thinking constantly of like this conversation and going, oh yeah, the last time we talked about a movie that was on this level of like, what exactly is this director trying to do? It was that one, maybe. I don't know. I don't think I've been as mystified by a movie, or at least within the context of talking about it on this show. So
I would say that one, or not that it's the same, but I was going to say it made me think of what was it? The Book of Henry.
Oh, the Book of Henry. Yeah.
You guys had the best. You guys had the best reaction to that movie. Like it bothered me to the point where I didn't see it because of how poorly you guys reacted to it. It made me sad just hearing you guys talk about it. So I was like, I don't want to. I'm going to save my money.
I think that lost a man a Star Wars movie too. Like
it did. That is nuts. But maybe gained him another Jurassic World movie. So
that's true. That's true.
He's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah.
He's fine.
Yeah. Right. We don't feel sorry for any of these people that we talk about for the record.
No. All right, cool. Well, do you guys have anything else you want to say about Malignant?
See it.
time to cut the cancer out.
Yeah.
You know what's also crazy? If you say that to the person that wronged you and they don't get it, they don't give a fuck about you. They forgot about you. She's like, huh? And then she's like, oh, why did it take her so long? That was a crazy thing to say. And you would remember saying that to another human being.
Especially saying it like in a situation where you had like a mutant mutant being controlling the lights and the power and overpowering every person in your hospital.
Yes.
Well, see, that flashback was like 30 years before the or 27 years, I think, actually, is the number they put on it. But like,
1990, what, 4?
Yeah.
3?
Yeah, for one thing, that they didn't age enough. Those doctors didn't age enough within that amount of time. But let's leave that aside. But also, like, there's plenty of years with which to play around with the other things that doctor was up to at that clinic. So you can maybe we'll get a little bit of an explanation of, like, you know, what other things she was doing that made her not so amazed by this this mutant you know, kid that she kind of forgot. Well, I say different things all the time when we kill mutant children. Which one are you? You know.
Yeah. I love the, like, the girl that we aged up, she just walked out of the door. What?
I know.
Oh, you saw the picture. I see you saw the picture on my desk.
Yeah.
Yes.
What? That feels like a scene that you know you need, and you're looking around and you're like, who do we have that's still on set right now? Okay, you come over here. What can we have these people say that we need to get out this piece of information, you know? No, that was like but again, in a movie where you're saying, oh, maybe this was all intentional, it's like, oh, the fact that it's a little clunky, if not on purpose, it certainly doesn't, like, it doesn't affect what we're talking about. Like, it only lends to the schlocky fun of this movie.
But to his credit, his drawing was spot on.
Yeah, that's true.
Steve, when you do an age up, they don't look you look exactly.
He is on a whole nother level. I mean, give that guy a ring. Did he survive? I don't even know if he lived.
I don't think he was. I
don't think many people lived at that police station.
We'll just assume he had a really great last moment drawing, the most accurate aged up drawing ever in police history. Good.
How is it we haven't talked about, though, the not the police station itself, but the holding cell?
Yeah,
that scene.
Oh, the women's
Royal Rumble
is fucking insane. I mean, even the way it's shot, like, talk about this movie's given up on scaring you. This is like made. It's like it's just like one person after another shows up, and also the women in the cell were these different types. That it felt very dated in a way, but like I guess they were supposed to be like streetwalkers and people that got picked up by the cops or whatever. But it just felt like I don't know, just a very funny assortment of like easily recognizable women. So that
was one of them Zoe Bell?
Yes,
yeah, that's what I thought.
She was kind of the main one, the sort of main antagonist of the bunch, and they were really rough. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a tough scene in there.
Yeah,
but no, that was insane. That scene was. But I mean, you could sort of feel like, when you get to a scene like that, you go, oh, I sort of get it. I get why they made this movie. You know, like, this is what they were building up to. Like, and if anyone tells you this movie gets crazy, they're probably talking about like someone, their head getting stepped on and their eyes popping out kind of shit. Like, that's just over the top insane, you know?
Check.
Yeah. Now you've seen that.
You want to just kill a random a random gang member that isn't even trying to fight her, just gets pushed into the circumference of this danger zone, just like, what?
Yeah, super strength, throwing them across.
We just sold so many tickets for this movie, just so.
I guess we did.
So for your efforts for getting James, that this will do a lot for those.
See that movie. Yeah.
All right, so Malignant's in theaters now. It's also, like we said, on HBO Max, and it's the standard. Like, it'll be on there for, I think it's 30 days or 31 days. So you have an option to see it there while you can. That'll do it for this episode. Movieshmovie.com is the website. You can find us any podcast platform we should be on, and you can link to all those from that webpage. We're on the social medias as well. All of them.com/movieshmovie, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is. I'm sure, hopefully we're there. And like, Facebook also has this podcast feed that's working now. So you can even listen to the podcast through Facebook. on the Movie Schmovie site. I don't know what we got coming up in the next week. I know next week, I don't think we'll see it in time, but Mike Flanagan's new series on Netflix comes out, the Midnight Mass. So hopefully
Cannot wait.
we can see that maybe next weekend and talk about that the week after. I don't know. We'll see what we can make happen. But there's a couple of movies coming out over the next week or so that we'll probably try to check out and, get on the show next week. And eventually we need to finish our watch them all for Nightmare on Elm Street. One of these weeks coming up, especially in October. We'll get that done for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, man, that'll do it. Do you guys have anything else you want to mention before we get out of here? Besides, go see Malignant or check Malignant out while it's on HBO Max.
No,
Nothing else. Okay. So, yeah. All right, good. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.